Joining me on Zoom is Todd Meyers with Penelec. Todd, how you doing this morning?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me on.
All right. First off, tell us what you do for Penelec. A lot of people may not know this, but Penelec, of course, is a subsidiary of First Energy, and you were telling me that there are a lot of First Energy's presence is felt throughout Pennsylvania.
That's correct. We have nearly 2 million customers in Pennsylvania, including customers of Penelec, adjacent West Penn Power, that I know some of your listeners would be customers there. Penn Power, which is sort of wraps around the Duquesne service territory to the west, and then finally Med-Ed on the far side of the state, Pocono area, York, Reading, those types of spots. So I am the spokesman for all of First Energy's Pennsylvania companies.
It's certainly been an unprecedented week with the major storms that rolled through Indiana County last Tuesday, knocking out power to a majority of the county for most of the week. What was it like from Penelec's side? I imagine that this must have been stressful for the company, just about as stressful as it was for the customers.
Yes, this was an unprecedented storm, probably the worst storm that we've had in Pennsylvania in the last 15 years or so. So it was a major storm for us. We knew this severe weather was on the way. I'm not sure that forecasters or anyone knew just how severe it would be. So we took a lot of precautions. We reached out ahead of time to many contractors, saying that we might need them. We staffed up sort of for the overnight. Tuesday into Wednesday, and we got a real blockbuster of a windstorm that came through, and it really tore up areas of Indiana County. That was one of the most hard hit areas. I think your neighbor over there in Cambria, I think they had 110-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
These winds swept pretty much west to east in a very wide path. Didn't peter out till you got to State College. Everything in front of it came down on our lines.
So you're saying just about everything as far as getting electric service to the customers was just damaged by this storm and
All,
damaged a lot.
Yep, off right-of-way trees falling into poles, branches that brought wire down. It broke poles. It broke cross arms. It made things very difficult to get around early on with all the road closures. Very widespread damage. A tornado only hits in a sporadic area, and that does incredible damage. But these straight line winds had a wall of wind that created damage across a very large, pathway.
That's a very good analogy there. A wall of wind hitting Indiana County. So we know the extent of the damage. You mentioned also Cambria County saw a lot of it. What was it like system wide?
Well, system-wide, Penelec had probably about 110,000 customers out of power, and most of those areas were, the sort of the central Pennsylvania. It wasn't the big areas up in the Erie spot. West Penn Power had damage everywhere. State College was damaged. We had almost 250,000 customers out. Penn Power had a number of customers out. All told, nearly 400,000 customers, and you're starting to get moving towards one in five or so of our customers in Pennsylvania being impacted, and that is a huge storm.
That is a huge impact. So knowing that, again, you had prepared a little bit, but you obviously didn't have the prediction model saying that this was going to be massive. So when did the idea come around to say, hey, let's bring in the teams from Ohio, New York, elsewhere?
Well, we prepared a lot because we knew that the our internal forecasters had a large footprint of heavy winds, and we do begin to bring in people, and we begin to have people who are helping us locally build power lines and do maintenance, switch their hats immediately so they can help us. But that full court press to get about 4,000 line workers in from 18 different states. You don't call those all those in until you know where you have, because you don't, it's very costly, and also you don't have places to stage them. So you need to see that you have the damage. But we began immediately that night, Tuesday. Right after that came through, we knew what we had on our hands, and the call went out, and we had boots on the ground, the very next day, and then coming in from places as far from Alabama, Massachusetts, we're in within several days. And like I said, we had we had approximately 95% of all our customers restored by Saturday afternoon, and that's really
Mhm.
about 4 days after the storm. So it was a large effort.
It was, and we saw the effect of that because we're seeing in the hotel parking lots here in Indiana County, we're seeing instead of regular passenger vehicles, we're seeing the utility trucks parked there, either be using those as staging areas or them staying the night there to be able to work the next day and continue through this. So it was just a lot of workers. And it's great that you have such good partners in the fact that they were able to come up on a moment's notice.
Well, that's right. I mean, the whole utility industry is predicated on mutual assistance. We send our crews down south all the time for hurricanes. No one utility has enough people sitting off waiting for a storm like this. If we did, they wouldn't have work to do every day. We wouldn't be able to afford our electric industry or our power bills. And so that's what it is. It's mutual assistance. We all come together for each other.
When it looks like the end of the tunnel is a few feet away, and for many people it was in Indiana County on Sunday, it was another massive storm, this time bringing hail and wind, knocking power out to some of the other communities. Was there a feeling of here we go again coming through?
Yes, as soon as Wednesday, we had other storms on Wednesday. We had some storms, like you said, through the weekend, and this weather pattern has us set up for the possibility of more storms this evening. Not like what we had, but still out there, and there's still people working, and it does impact our ability to get things done.
All right. So I noticed there was a quick response for what happened Sunday night, and again, just kind of layering on the response from Wednesday. Were these crews just ready to go on Sunday whenever that power outage hit again? Were these out of state crews just like, oh, we got to go up, we got to go back at it?
You know, if there's any silver lining to this type of event, it's that you have all those boots on the ground. So when these garden variety storms come up, we got a lot of extra hands in the air to turn wrenches.
All right. I did see that Penelec and FirstEnergy activated the water and ice program over the weekend, which was a very good idea for people to have some of the necessities. So now that the power's back on, how much longer is that going to run?
I believe that will be ending here today sometime.
Okay, so ending on Monday then. Now, what's being done on Penelec's side to kind of make sure that things are beefed up? Maybe something like this does a catastrophic, well, obviously you can't control the weather, but the catastrophic damage can be controlled. How are you making sure that that does not happen again or is at least mitigated a little bit?
We have and that's a good question. I don't know that you can mitigate against this type of intensity because so many of the trees, 91% of our tree related outages are caused by off right of way trees. And by that I mean trees that are beyond where we have the legal standing to trim.
Hmm.
If you go outside and you look, you can see many trees are much taller than the lines. But we recently had a rate case. The rates changed here a little bit in January. And we have a lot of additional money to go after trees, some of them off the right of way. So we're working with property owners. So when we see something that's a leaning tree, diseased or damaged tree, we're requesting their permission. We got to get that to
Hmm.
get out there and handle those types of things. But we do spend, $50 million in West Penn Power, a similar amount in Penelec alone, trimming trees year in and year out. Another big thing that we're doing is we're spending $1.4 billion over the next 5 years on our distribution system. This will be the third phase of like a multi-year program. This is much larger than the last spend that we did. That was about $700 million for 5 years prior to this year. But what that is replacing poles, replacing wires, selectively putting some things underground in areas where we know get hit quite a bit. um, just putting things on the line that are automated that can reduce the scope of outages and reduce the duration if you have a problem because it can switch customers quickly to a nearby power line. So and I'll send you some information about that, but there are
Hmm.
large numbers of projects that are ongoing and have been going. And actually, since 2019, in the areas that we've been able to do this type of work, we've actually reduced sort of the number of customers who were impacted by outages by about 14%. So it is taking hold, but because the system is so large, you can't do all that work possibly in a year or two, because it took 50, 60, 70 years to build out to where we are today.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I imagine projects like that would take a lot of time. I would imagine that a lot of Penelec's customers learned a lot about what to do whenever this sort of situation happens. So, what can our listeners take away from this? Maybe do some prep of their own before, in case the worst does happen.
Yeah, there are things. First of all, you know, having a game plan that if you do have power out for a protracted amount of time, and if you have someone elderly, very young, where would you go? You need to try to understand if you would go to to a friend's house, to somewhere that's not impacted. And what we try to do is, as soon as they're available, we try to give you an ETR that at least gives you a general idea of sort of the worst case scenario of when you might get your power back on. So having a game plan is important. Always having fresh flashlights. You don't want to use candles because they can cause house fires. You want the flashlight batteries fresh. You want to have some bottled water on hand, meals you can prepare without having to cook. This time of year, not quite as many things we got to do to talk about how to stay cool or stay warm. At least it's fairly temperate. And then there's always, if you're using a generator, you need to make sure that you operate it properly in well ventilated areas so you don't cause yourself to succumb to carbon dioxide. And the other thing that you need to do is make sure it's hooked up correctly so you don't send backfeed back over the lines to us.
Right.
But the most important thing that I should have started this whole interview with is, please, a storm like this, there's wire on the ground everywhere. You
Yeah.
need to assume it is energized conductor. If you touch it, no sugarcoating this, Josh. You touch it, you could be killed. And if you're not
Definitely.
killed, you'll be grievously injured. So important to keep kids, pets, and others away, because that's one of the first things that we're doing when we're out there after a storm like this. We're getting calls from 911. Our customers are calling us, telling us where they see wire down, and the first things we're doing is getting crews out there to see if that line is energized. If it is, they de-energize it. If it's not, they roll to the next hazard. And sometimes there's far more lines, especially in a storm like this. There's hundreds of cases where things are down. So sometimes we'll have hazard responders. They're people with a different job during the week, but during storms they change a hat, and they'll go out there and tape things off and stay there until somebody can arrive to test things. But everyone just needs to stay away. And that means after a storm like this, we all want to go out and sightsee and see what giant trees are
Yeah.
down and the destruction.
Yeah.
All that dangerous stuff can be buried under those branches. Walking around, especially at night after something like this, lots of times these storms hit at night, it can be deadly. So please call us at 1-888-LIGHTS with two S's on the end, or 911 to report. Stay at least the length of a yellow school bus, 30 feet away from any wire you see down. Doesn't need to be making noise, doesn't need to be sparkling or sizzling, can be deadly, looking just completely inert.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And we've been warning our listeners about that throughout this whole thing because, as you said,
But
one touch and you could be gone.
electricity travels nearly the speed of light. You cannot people think they can touch it. They cannot touch it. People think they can stick a wooden broom handle on something. Wooden
Oh,
broom
that's
handle is a lousy conductor, but when you're talking about that much electricity,
you're
just
still getting
about
it.
anything will conduct it.
Yeah. All right. Well, Todd, thank you very much for joining us. And we hope things are going a little bit better, a little less stressful now that this whole disaster is over. But again, thanks a lot. And please keep in touch.
You betcha. And a shout out to our customers who endured all this. And thank you much. Take care, Josh.